Coming up on Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind is the tools you'll need to approach your divorce more strategically and less reactively.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Glad you're here. We got a lot to talk about today. This is Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind. This podcast was inspired by my book on the same name to help people be more creative and less reactive. And I know it's so hard to be more creative when you're stressed, when you're in panic, when things aren't going your way, where you don't even want the divorce, when you're grieving. Yeah, that's all those things you're going to have to do. And it's sometimes really fast, especially in the beginning. If your spouse wants a divorce, it's going to be hard to get going. And this podcast, my book, is a step in that right direction to think more creatively. And this is all about strategy. The tactics are going to be with your attorney, but this podcast, the book, is about strategy. And you got to have the right strategy. Today, we're dealing with do-overs. We're in the court system. This is a three-part series on the court system. We started off with court conferences. That's where you have to move things along. Then we moved on to court guidance, where you need some help from the court. Maybe you resolved 80% of different things about your case, but just a couple of issues you need some help. And today we're going to talk about do-overs or appeals. This is what happens where you actually have the court make a decision and you're not happy about it. And that's what sometimes happens. So that's what we're going to be talking about. The big picture that I want you, if you remember nothing else from this podcast, just remember this. Appeals are expensive and you have a low chance. I mean, it's not impossible. You have a low chance of winning. All right, before we get into this episode, if you want all of this information all at once in a book form, you read my book. It's available on Amazon. You can skim through it. I try to make it short and actionable, even shorter than this podcast. And you can come back to this podcast on different sections that you find that you need more help on. All right, let's get with our quote. Our quote, it was inspired by all the books I read. I love chapters that start with quotes. We got our owls looking over our shoulder, bringing us wisdom. So let's get into this moment with this quote. It's from Robert Maxwell, and it goes like this. A person must be big enough to admit their mistakes, smart enough to profit from them, and strong enough to correct them. Now, listen, judges are people. Most people, including this person, doesn't like to admit that they made mistakes. Hard to admit we made mistakes, isn't it? Isn't it hard for you? Oh, if it's not hard for you, I know you might not be totally being honest about that because we want to be right. We don't want to be wrong. Sometimes we are. Sometimes, it happens. All right. So yes, judges are people. They don't want to be proven wrong. So that's what we're going to be talking about today because sometimes it is an uphill battle to do that. All right. So first key point is you settle your case. You settle your case because you may lose. The court takes the case away from you, takes control away from you. And that's the whole point. Now, I remember I had a story when I was a little younger and a little bit more inexperienced and maybe a little bit more ego, where I thought I was the plaintiff in the case. I thought I did an excellent job. I was feeling it. My client was happy. And we rested to go till defendant to take their case. So they're going to go, our case was rested, defendant was going to do their case. And in between break, they came over to me and said they want to settle for basically 80%, maybe 85% of what we asked for. And for whatever reason, we didn't settle. And then lo and behold, the court went against us. So that's why you settle. Even when you think you have a great day in court, even when you think you're so good at trial, you never know. You never know. Let me bring this home to you for all those people who like data. I would say about 7 to 20% of cases that are appealed are successful. So think of this. If you're more visual, think of this. Say you have a bag of marbles. You have a bag of marbles, 100 of them. And let's say 80 of them are white. So you got 80 white marbles, 20 red. And you put it in a bag, and then you pick a marble, one chance. Right? How hard is it to get that red marble. Now, for all those bettors out there, for people who like gambling, you're like, I could get one of those red marbles. Not so easy. There's only 20 of them, but you got to get 80 other white ones are going to block your way. And that's what I want you to think about. So first thing is, you settle your case if you can, if you don't want to take any risk. All right. Second key point is, if you do have a decision, court decisions are not always final. It's not like the 10 Commandments. It's not always final. You can basically modify it on appeal. You have an ability to go after that judge on appeal. So it's not always final. And sometimes in some states, you can even try to appeal an appeal. It's a whole system. That's why people maybe don't like lawyers, because can it ever just end? No, we don't like it ending as lawyers, no. So let me give an example. I had a trial. I was awarded zero. I represented the non-moneyed spouse. In most jurisdictions, if you're the non-moneyed spouse, you get attorney fees unless your client really acted out. And maybe in this case, the judge was biased against me, but the law is the law. And we lost at the trial level because they gave us zero attorney fees. But when we basically appealed it, the court gave us a good amount of attorney fees. And that's how this works. And I just want to make this clear for people. You know, just because they're a judge, they're just humans. And studies have shown that judges, or just like most people, are not better than average in determining who's lying and who's telling you the truth. So if you have even a wise judge, they might not be better than average in someone on the other side who's just lying. I think the only people that in the study at least were Secret Service agents were good at this. So for people who listen to this podcast, they know I love tennis. They've made some changes in tennis because of all these problems with line calls. And that made me think about making calls, judgments. And sometimes there's been bad calls. But try to convince that referee on the court of a bad call when you don't have evidence. And that's why they moved to electronic line calling, and that's why they moved to even video. So you have your proof. All right, the last key point to focus on here is, even if there's a mistake, unless it's major, might not be enough. Might not be enough. So I had a case where the other side was ordered to sell property by a certain date. And that date came and went, and the property wasn't sold. So what do? We send a demand letter, send a default letter, nothing happens. We had to go to court. The court saw very clearly, it's a date. It didn't take a genius to figure out that they were wrong. And we got the judgment. They ordered the sale, but the other side made an appeal. And there was some factors, some emotional factors, and I really wasn't focused on it because I was representing the other side, that the appellate court liked, and they didn't have to sell the home. So even when the facts are on your side, you never know. Made me think about the Innocent Project. You know that nonprofit group, the Innocent Project, doing such great work, helping people who are wrongly convicted, spending years, decades in jail. They help people get out who are wrongly convicted. Turns out about 4,000 years, yes, 4,000 years, innocent people have spent behind bars. Whew. That's terrible. So let me just maybe give another analogy to really what this is all about. If it's a minor mistake, so let's say you have a recipe and you're baking a cake, and the cake calls for 2/3 of a cup of sugar, but you only need 1/3 of a cup. It didn't follow the recipe, but you got your cake. Maybe it's not sweet enough, but no one's going to do anything. Better luck's next time. And I think that's really what I want you to leave you with, that winning is possible overall in these appeals. It's expensive, and the odds are against you. All right, so that wraps up our series on court. We're going to focus on a new series next episode, which is how to find the best divorce attorney for you. Not the best divorce attorney. You don't need necessarily a top dog. Oh, and for people who don't know the top dog, check it out. We have, the top dog, the brawler, the swalmer, the boxer, different styles of divorce attorneys. And you can read about that or check it out on our podcast. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining, for taking time out of your schedule, which I know is busy. I mean, if you're in a divorce and you just started, or maybe you just got served, things are overwhelming. So I want to thank you for taking time out of that schedule to work on your divorce, to think about strategy. So hopefully you can start making better decisions. I'm your host, Corey Shapiro. Join us next time on Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind.
Thank you for tuning in to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. We would love to hear your feedback. Send Corey an email to feedback@gettingdivorced.org. And if you've read his book, please consider leaving an Amazon review. This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.